Story 1. I watched my twin die in the hospital, which destroyed me mentally. 2 weeks later, I was holding her picture and crying on my day off when my wife walked into the room and asked, "Are you not over her yet?" In that moment, I knew my marriage was over. She moved out 2 weeks later. Story 2. I found out the hard way that he didn't wash himself after sex one night and had sat on my pillow. I went to work the next day and kept catching wafts of a terrible smell. When I got home and saw the sunlight, I noticed a large stain on my pillow. I had slept on something unpleasant and gone to work like that. This was after dealing with his awful plaque problem and bad breath. So I told him, "Now I have to tell you to brush your teeth and clean yourself?" Story 3. Lack of communication has led to many unresolved issues, culminating in a significant scandal. We should avoid this in the future. Please communicate as much as you need. Story 4. She constantly feels like a victim. Everything bad in her life is someone else's fault, not a result of her poor choices. Story 5. The girl had a strong desire for children at 19. I could only picture myself living in a trailer park with 10 kids. No, thank you. Story 6. My inability to cope with grief has been significant. When I was 19, my father died suddenly. I was in college and had a serious girlfriend, and we cared for each other deeply. However, in my grief, I became cold and distant. I shut down completely. I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to care for another person and pushed her away. Several years later, we reconnected. I had matured and received help with my grief. I was able to apologize to her for shutting her out, and she accepted my apology. We have both been happily married to other people for many years, but we remain friends. Story 7. Being in a bad mood too often is challenging. Having a stressful day, week, or even month is one thing, but constantly feeling unhappy, stressed, exhausted, or grumpy most of the time is emotionally draining. Story 8. I dated a girl who criticized me and claimed I was not a real man, a definition she based on her womanizing and intoxicated father. I gave up on dating after that experience. Since that decision, my life has been improving. The effort stopped being worth the reward. Story 9. His closest friends were his ex-girlfriend and the man she left him for, and he was spending every other night at their place while ignoring my texts and not telling me where he was. He had already mentioned that they had propositioned him for threesomes before. That was some situation I had too much self-respect to tolerate. Story 10. Had no clue how to be a functional adult. If you're 26 years old, your boyfriend shouldn't need to tell you, "I don't want to hang out at your apartment because it's constantly dirty and always smells bad since you only scoop the litter box once a week." Story 11. I felt like I was the only one putting in effort. It wasn't explosive or dramatic, just a constant emotional exhaustion from always being the one to plan, care, and fix things. Eventually, I realized I wasn't in a relationship. I was in a one-person performance. Story 12. At first, it was finances. I resolved that issue tenfold and had us on the verge of living the life, making $8,000 to $10,000 a month. I received no support and was dealing with all the household chores, paying the bills, and taking care of the kids. I wouldn't go to bed until 2 or 3 in the morning, then have to get up at 5 and do it all over again. During that time, she told me I wasn't paying enough attention to her, saying, "Money isn't everything. I just want you home when you are home." She begged me to take a regular 9 to 5 job again. I did, but financial problems returned, and it still wasn't enough. No matter what I did, it was never sufficient. What really hurt was that right before I started making that money, everyone in my corner told me to give up and get in line. I had no support, even though I proved everyone wrong at every step. The one person I wanted in my corner wasn't there when I needed her. I just needed someone to tell me, "Hey, you're doing it. You're making it happen." Instead, all I received was ridicule. Story 13. He wouldn't communicate and started to become a mean person. I tried my best to make it work, attempted to talk, gave him space, and accommodated him in every possible way, but it wasn't enough. I believed he was going to marry me, but in the end, I was misled for quite a while he used me. It was heartbreaking to watch him turn into such an awful person. Story 14. They said they didn't like dogs. I mean, come on. That's like saying you don't like happiness. That relationship went to the dogs. Literally. Story 15. Horrible comments my ex once told me after 6 years. Honestly, if I came across you on the streets, I probably wouldn't check you out, but your personality makes up for it. So basically, in the eyes of the girl who was supposed to love me, I was barely average. Story 16. Every time I wanted to be intimate, it felt like pulling teeth. He acted like I was overly sexual and only interested in his body. As a result, we had intimacy maybe once a month. One day, I decided not to ask anymore and see how long it would take him to initiate. For months passed with nothing, and I ended the relationship. He was, of course, shocked. And no, there was no infidelity. I'm pretty sure he is just asexual. Story 17. My husband ended his relationship with his ex-girlfriend because his mother had cancer and was fighting for her life. He could only spend time with her every other weekend, but his girlfriend would insist on spending that time with her instead and would become upset if he wanted to see his mother. It's hard to understand why someone would act that way. Story 18. Marijuana. I have no problem with recreational smoking, but it was ruining our relationship. He lost his job because he showed up under the influence and then ended up living off me for months. When my parents took us out to dinner, he sneaked into the bathroom to get high. It was so embarrassing and disrespectful. I could never bring him to any family functions after that. Then, he stood me up for 2 dates in a row because he was too intoxicated and got lost on his way over. There's a time and place for recreation. Story 19. We had been seeing each other for 2 weeks when she stormed out of my house and threw a tantrum because I called my dog my best girl in front of her. Story 20. This may sound petty, but I ended a relationship with a nice guy due to his poor table manners and complete disregard for hygiene. I tried to talk to him a few times, but in the end he said, "This is who I am." So I thanked him for the time we had together and walked away. Story 21. Gaslighting was something I couldn't quite identify, but it felt too overwhelming to bear. I didn't know how to describe it at the time, as I hadn't heard the term. Perfectly describes my situation then. Story 22. He did not communicate well with me, did not consider my feelings, was overly attached to his mother, had no goals or aspirations, and left things unfinished. Story 23. Religion. She went from being an atheist to a born-again Christian, constantly discussing her relationship with God. Story 24. He was terrified of coming to my house. After 3 years, he stayed over for the first time after we attended a wedding. He was sick all night from anxiety. We dated for nearly 8 years, and he avoided my house completely. My parents are nice people. Story 25. He moved his adult children, their partners, and 2 grandchildren into our home just 2 weeks after my mother passed away. The second weekend after her passing, he told me to empty her room because he was going to get his kids. About 2 weeks later, I left. I took the money I had been saving for a trip and rented an apartment, leaving all my furniture behind. I had a store deliver a bed and sofa the day after I moved in completely. Story 26. Her constant need to belittle me in public whenever she felt I was receiving too much positive attention contributed to her ongoing quest for better versions of what we already had. Story 27. Her parents wanted us to get married after about 6 months of talking, even though we were in a long-distance relationship. I told her that I needed more time, especially since I had only met her in person once. Her mom didn't like my response and basically convinced her to end things with me. The funny thing is, I really thought she was the one I was going to marry. If they had waited maybe a year, I would have said yes. Story 28. Lying about numerous minor issues consistently demonstrates an overall lack of honesty. He always devised some excuse or fabricated a story when confronted with a lie or half-truth. Often, it was evident that the lie he was promoting contradicted common sense. Story 29. Making every single conversation sexual is exhausting. I'm not a prude, but it's tiring to constantly receive comments that verge on harassment from someone who is supposed to love you. Just leave me alone. Story 30. There were no secrets at all. The moment I said or did something, They would tell their closest friends, even about the most intimate moments. They also shared constant news about those friends and their opinions on us and everything. I was essentially dating three people, not just one. There were more factors, but that was the most significant one. Story 31. Unhealthy attachment to the mother, inability to communicate needs or be vulnerable. They only blame you. Story 32. His church and his increasing Christian conservatism have changed our relationship. We went from living together and spending every night in bed to needing to get married because his church doesn't approve of our arrangement. I told him when we met that I would never marry again after 2 disastrous marriages, and he seemed okay with that at the time. I felt misled, so I said no and goodbye. I'm still waiting for him to move out. Now he's on the couch. That was his choice. Story 33. He had about 4 responses when I tried to tell him something important or emotional. The last straw was when I found out my dad had overdosed, and he just told me, "Good luck with that." Story 34. I believe his refusal to be accountable in any serious internal way was troubling. He performed his duties correctly, but I never sensed his internal or emotional state. I have been attending therapy since my 20s, and I suspect he learned my therapeutic vocabulary to give the impression that he had done the internal work, yet he was very manipulative when things did not go his way. His fears created a reality in my life in inappropriate ways. He was so nice that I barely noticed. I know he wasn't physically abusive, so I thought my concerns weren't significant. At that point in my life, I struggled to understand my emotional cues. I also allowed an inappropriate person into my life, and I have to live with the consequences of that decision. I suspect he is addicted to pornography and is secretly in the closet. I wish he had the tools to be honest with himself. This lack of honesty likely made my own honesty feel like a threat. It's hard to come to terms with, and I am still quite angry about how much I gave up by being passive in my life. He also possesses a hard drive containing all the explicit photos and videos from every ex he has ever had. I might be included in it. His current girlfriend is likely included as well. I wish I could talk to her for 2 minutes to determine if she is aware of this, if she understands she is the current focus, and if she has seen videos of me. I absolutely do not consent to those being viewed or existing. She is mistaken if she thinks she is somehow exempt, and I wish someone had taken the time to make me truly understand how creepy his behavior was. He likely needs therapy and healing, but he will probably never seek it due to stigma. You do not have to be suicidal to seek counseling. There are much earlier indicators that something is wrong. Story 35. He ordered chicken fingers or a hamburger at every restaurant we ever visited. No matter the restaurant or type of food, he would be very disappointed if he couldn't find something like that on the menu. We lasted about a year. Story 36. It has always been about cheating. I often hear that men cheat more frequently, but I disagree. I believe women cheat more often and are better at hiding it. Story 37. Last 3 relationships. One was obsessed with social media platforms, wanting to post herself constantly. She kept trying to test me over some trivial videos. After checking one of the videos, I saw the comments were filled with misandrist remarks. I didn't think she was a misandrist, but that attitude can lead to problematic views. Another did not clean her cat's litter box, causing her apartment to smell unpleasant. In a long-term relationship, I tolerated years of put-downs, negativity, manipulative behavior, and substance abuse. She claimed I didn't do anything. Even though I was the only one regularly cleaning the apartment, buying groceries, and cooking, I managed our finances while working full-time. I would clean while she inspected my work critically but did not contribute herself. It didn't start off that way, but she became increasingly intolerable and often expressed misandrist views. I broke up with her 3 years ago, and my self-esteem has still not recovered. Story 38. He was trying to change me. From my appearance to my opinions, everything about me. I had never experienced this before or after, so it took some time to figure it out. Story 39. My ex-wife came out as a lesbian and then transitioned after we divorced. They were abusive and manipulative toward me for much of the end of our relationship. Story 40. Lying about drug use, he tried to fix things while his sister, who has mental health issues, moved in with her 2 children. Story 41. One reason was that he would get drunk, fight with his dad, and punch walls while in college. My dad did the same, but he fought with my mom, so I cut my losses. I do not want to deal with all that again. Story 42. Democratization of my personal life and space. When it's put to a poll, I do better on my own because I don't have to pretend to want their input. Story 43. He told me his fantasy was to have a sexual experience with a transgender woman. I'm not sure if that's the most appropriate term, but that's what he used. Story 44. One can mention distance, but that is just an excuse. It is about a lack of communication. Communication is a choice. People claim they are busy, but when you actually talk, you should engage with energy. It should not be a lazy, one-word answer. You should ask questions to show that you care about what is happening in that person's life, and it demonstrates that you are listening. She did not do that. She seemed bored. When I called her out on it, she did not take responsibility. She expressed that she did not want any drama, and that was it. She went through many relationships only to realize later that she needed to mature and reflect. Now she is taking a break and is single. She does not want to reach out due to feelings of guilt. She would prefer to start fresh with someone new. If she were to reach out to me, I would give her a chance. Story 45. I need to break up with him, but I will feel bad. Early on, I received dates and flower arrangements. I am indecisive, but he would order things he knew I would eat in case I didn't like my food. He gave me cuddles and was genuinely invested in my happiness. However, he became lazy and could no longer plan a date without my input. The man I fell in love with is not the same person I have now. Story 46. I got pregnant in a 10-year relationship for the first time. While we both knew we weren't in a great position for kids, as I was in graduate school at the time, I was hoping for some support and maybe an adult conversation to make a difficult decision together and get through it. He completely broke down, crying and hyperventilating, unable and later unwilling to talk about it. I realized just how alone I was in the relationship. Sometimes something happens and you see something in someone that you can't unsee and you can't take it back. We were together for a few more years, but it was clear that it was a one-way support system. Story 47. He broke up with me during a fight. Looking back, I'm pretty sure it was a manipulation tactic. We were arguing about something trivial, and I was crying when suddenly he said, "I guess we should just break up then." I asked him if he was serious because I don't do on again, off again. He said it felt pretty serious, so I stopped crying, turned around, grabbed my things and left. He called a couple of days later, saying he had changed his mind and didn't want to break up after all. Too bad. I was 19 and thought I loved him, so it destroyed me at the time, but it was the best thing he could have done for me. We fought all the time. I thought that was normal. He was manipulative and constantly made me feel bad about myself by comparing me to other women, even celebrities. He acted like he was God's gift to women and never missed an opportunity to tell me how lucky I was that he wouldn't cheat on me because he saw a really attractive girl at a party and wanted recognition for not approaching her. What a loser. Sorry for the rant. He was 3 years older and definitely took advantage of the fact that I was young and inexperienced when we met. Now I'm happily married to the most supportive and thoughtful man in the world. We have a beautiful daughter together. And he still makes me laugh every day after over a decade together. I have never had a fight with him. We never raise our voices at each other or make the other person feel bad. I'm much happier with the person I am around him. Story 48. Alcoholism and the resulting trust issues stemming from her hiding it and lying about it caused problems in our relationship. She became adamant about getting married and having children, but I couldn't trust her enough to move forward, so we decided to separate. Story 49. He didn't do what he said he would. He is a great person, but he isn't financially stable. I was making all the compromises in the relationship, and he couldn't even look for a new job or career unless I sat down with him to help. I am not after money, but I am attracted to self-improvement. He wasn't happy where he was, but he wasn't willing to change. Story 50. I was walking with my ex in a mall. I reached out and took her hand in mine. She pulled her hand away and said, "What do you think you're doing?" That wasn't the first sign of a problem, but it was the last. Story 51. Disloyalty, choosing others over oneself. Even his own mother had to confront him. I didn't say anything. Story 52. She lived about 30 minutes away from me, and most of the time it was a 45-minute drive. Back then, I didn't have much money. I was fresh out of high school. I would sell my belongings for gas money, drive over there, spend 10 to 12 hours with her, and then drive back late at night. I did this for 5 to 6 days a week for 4 years straight. She would never make an effort to come to my area. If I didn't visit one of the days, either because I was too tired from driving or didn't have gas money, she would throw a tantrum, cry on the phone, and spam me. You get the gist. In the second year of that relationship, I had an opportunity to attend college, and I even had an apartment and other expenses covered. She emotionally manipulated me so heavily that I gave up that opportunity to stay with her and take care of her, as she put it. A year later, I felt terrible watching my friends graduate and start their careers, while I was doing nothing with my life and selling anything I could for gas money. I had enough and decided to pursue online college so I wouldn't have to move away. I chose to focus hard, which meant I would only go over 2 to 3 days a week while spending the rest of my time studying. During this time, she kept reminding me that I had become too independent, which never really made sense to me, even to this day, because I was still putting in a lot of effort into our relationship. By the 4th year, she told me, "You've become too independent and don't need me." And then she left. It hurt a bit, I'll admit, but at the same time, it lifted a huge weight off my shoulders, and it was a lesson learned. By the way, I'm hanging out and happy now with my wonderful significant other. Story 53. Selfish and reckless financial and career decisions. We were together for 5 years at the time. She had 2 teenagers. We split household expenses. One afternoon, I came home from work, and she informed me that she had decided to resign with immediate effect, which she did earlier that day. There had been no prior discussion about how the household and her 2 children would be managed. I was left to deal with it. 6 months later, it was over. Story 54. He didn't cheat, but he spent a lot of time with his friends. One Halloween night, I was home handing out candy, and he said he would stop by. I got so excited and texted him at 9:30 p.m. "Where are you?" He replied, "He said you slept with him, so goodbye." I never slept with anyone but my boyfriend at that time. He believed the accusation with no proof. 5 years later, the friend was arrested and admitted he lied. It was funny to see my ex's desperation. Story 55. My former spouse had suppressed anger and violent behavior towards me, and after I divorced him, he exhibited the same behavior toward his second wife. Anger is now being recognized more than ever and requires treatment for the trauma experienced by individuals. You never know what might trigger it. If you're in a relationship where you are being hit or violated in any way, it is crucial to leave. That individual must recognize their anger and seek help. Unfortunately, my former spouse would not allow himself to get the help he needed. Story 56. Listening to the wrong people and allowing them to control the narrative can lead you to believe their opinions about you instead of recognizing the truth. She only wanted you for what you are, and you were more than good enough. But that's in the past. Story 57. My father. I saw more of the real him during the pandemic, and unfortunately, so did my ex. She absolutely hated him, and he is a big reason why she probably wanted to leave. I know the post says outside of cheating, but she did that as well twice. She slowly fell out of love with me because I wasn't moving at her pace. In the beginning, I never pressured her to do anything. I tried for nearly a year to find a job in my field, information technology, and had no luck. Meanwhile, she was working at Target and was slowly falling into depression. I finally landed a job after she broke up with me. This still gives me pain, but I can manage a bit better. Story 58. We were in a long-distance relationship with the eventual plan for him to join me before the year ended. I was only a few days away from flying over to visit him, and I noticed that whenever we talked on the phone or video call, our conversations made it clear he was not going to move away from home, but he was too afraid to say it. He spoke about starting a new job there and how exciting it was for his career. As happy as I was for him, it did not align with him moving to be with me. Then he mentioned moving out of his current apartment into a new living situation, which he was equally excited about. It was apparent this was a long-term interest, not a short-term one. So I called him out on it. He admitted that he wasn't sure how to come to terms with the move, leaving me with no choice but to end the relationship. Of course, we could have discussed other options that worked for both of us, but I lost all faith in our relationship when I realized he was essentially quiet quitting. Story 59. I received 7 stitches in my head after he threw a dinner plate at me, food and all. I had to have the mashed potatoes and gravy washed out of the wound first. Story 60. I met a great girl, and we had incredible chemistry. Our time together was amazing. Unfortunately, this was during a period when mental health was not widely discussed, and I was dealing with severe depression and self-esteem issues, which ultimately led to the deterioration of our relationship. Story 61. I dated this person for about a year, and it was honestly smooth with no problems at all. However, there was a challenge due to the loss of a loved one in their family that affected them significantly. During that time, I received an excellent job opportunity, but I would have to leave the state. I took the opportunity and left, which meant I couldn't physically be there for them and had to put my life on hold. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out for us, and we split. We spoke about it a few months later and remained on good terms. Their whole family treated me very well, and they were a great person, just not meant to be. I sometimes wonder if we would still be together if I hadn't left, but I was not in love with them, so it was definitely not meant to be. Story 62. He blamed my daughter for his son coming out as gay. It was over then and there. His true colors showed he is a homophobe and completely unsupportive of his son. I feel bad for the kid, but at the same time, his dad only has visitation rights and his mom loves him no matter what. The moral of the story is, don't talk negatively about my kids and expect me to stand up for you. That is the most foolish behavior I have seen in a relationship, and I have seen a lot in my over 30 years on Earth. Story 63. Drunk driving, but she wasn't the driver. I was not with the drunk driver, and I realized my comment made it sound like I was. Story 64. Her jealousy. I might as well have been cheating for the trouble I would get just from speaking to female friends and colleagues. Story 65. She was constantly moping about and would sulk if she didn't get her way. When I asked her what was wrong, she could never articulate it and would say, I don't know. Felt like I was in a relationship with an onion. Story 66. One of my first relationships was with my girlfriend, whose family came from considerable wealth. I, on the other hand, did not. Over time, I worked hard to cover expenses like meals and gifts. It never seemed enough, and I had to put in more hours, which meant less time with her. Ultimately, she ended the relationship because I couldn't provide the financial stability she desired. I wasn't wealthy, and I showed no signs of becoming so, which led to our breakup. Story 67. At least one person was trying to secretly get pregnant to manipulate me. Another individual, a single mother, frequently made poor decisions and had significant issues with the father of her child. Story 68. She did not live within our means, and her spending was out of control. Sadly, in her mind, maxed-out credit cards and payday loans were normal. I left, which improved my mental health and my credit score. Story 69. Lack of commitment. She would cancel dates because she wanted to do something else or hang out with her friends. I didn't mind her wanting to go out with her friends, but when it turned into almost every weekend, I realized the relationship wasn't going anywhere, so I ended it. The good news is that we are still friends to this day. Story 70. Assumption that everything had to be done by one person with no contribution from others, especially in living arrangements, work life, and decision-making. Story 71. Spotty communication. If we are not talking regularly, are we even still in a relationship? According to them, yes. According to me, it had been 2 weeks of silence preceded by 2 weeks of rescheduled or missed dates. Before anyone asks, I did not step outside the relationship during that time. I just considered myself no longer in one. Story 72. I experienced severe depression after a difficult situation. When I returned home, my wife was no longer attracted to me, and I found myself needing more from her. It felt like a slow decline of a once wonderful relationship. Story 73. I told my boyfriend he was self-absorbed. He ended the relationship immediately after 9 years. I haven't spoken to him since. Took me 3 full years to get over him. Story 74. Lying and the other person not contributing while demanding everything was not what I wanted. I wanted a partner, not a dependent. Story 75. There is a significant difference in values. A friend of mine turned out to be a habitual thief. Goodbye. A friend of mine turned out to hold racist views. Goodbye. Story 76. Alcohol, drugs, and misunderstood feelings and intentions made for a wild ride, to say the least. She bruised my chest in a drunken and drug-fueled temper tantrum about how I didn't love her. Story 77. She was emotionally abusive. She would create stories to make me feel sorry for her, enabling her to control my actions. Initially, I was just happy to be in a relationship, but over time, it became overwhelming to the point where I felt suicidal due to a lack of control in my life. She isolated me from my friends and determined my college major. When I finally had enough and moved out, she even pretended to have cancer. Last I heard, she found another partner to manipulate and has since had a couple of children with him. Good luck to him. Story 78. She told me she was actually jealous of her ex's new girlfriend, with whom he had become serious, and genuinely couldn't understand why that upset me. She literally expected me to apologize for taking it the wrong way. Story 79. Falling in love with the idea of someone, then feeling let down when you realize they aren't the person you wanted them to be, is a common experience. I feel like this happens to a lot of people at least once. If you're wise, afterward, you learn to see people for who they are instead of who you want them to be. I was really good friends with a wonderful Hispanic girl during my senior year of high school. After 5 years of no contact, we found each other on Instagram. The first few months were genuinely amazing. She was that sweet, adorable girl I remembered from when I was 18. Then my childhood dream girl became real. She had issues with marijuana, nicotine, and spending. At 24, she still lived at home. While that didn't bother me much, it's worth mentioning. She had such a simple life yet would become overwhelmed by the smallest inconveniences. She spent a lot of time with her friends, who were all girls. That didn't bother me in itself, but when they hung out, all they did was smoke, drink, and find new ways to spend money. It seemed like one of them was always having a problem with another, which spiraled into drama and left her stressed whenever someone was upset. She also disliked phone calls, which may sound trivial, but it is important to me. I want to talk, not just text all the time. In our short relationship, I felt she wasn't as thoughtful as I would like my partner to be. I bought her several gifts, but she never got me anything in return. I wasn't overindulging her, but I did get her a handmade mini turtle carved from stone since she loved turtles. I also gave her a few of my shirts while we were seeing each other, and later I got her a cool beach towel because she often went to the beach with her friends. On another occasion, I realized she didn't have any pepper spray, so I got her a mini one that attaches to her keychain for convenience. Additionally, I brought her flowers a couple of times on date nights. I never received anything in return. However, I remember one time when we were on a date at the mall, she insisted we go to the Lego store so she could buy her friends some figurines as gifts. I guess it all comes down to her being immature while I am looking for a serious partner. Story 80. Living to work when you spend 12 hours a day working and committing to a job that can be done remotely can be draining on your partner. Story 81. For me, it wasn't just cheating. My ex was immature, lazy, and unmotivated unless it involved something creative, like making bead jewelry or covering songs. I respect the drive to create art, but not if that is the only thing you are passionate about. He was also very selfish. I remember one time his dad asked him to help take down Christmas decorations, and he just didn't respond, saying he didn't feel like it. Keep in mind, his dad paid his portion of the rent, so I went instead. His dad was not happy with him. Another time, my car broke down, and he refused to drive 5 minutes to come get me. I would do anything for my partner. I expect some level of reciprocation. Story 82. My ex compromised moral integrity and our entire relationship for financial gain and being the community hero instead of handling anything in his home life. The first time he introduced me to his boss, who was apparently also his best friend, the man used multiple homophobic slurs and constantly bragged about his wealth while degrading others. When I expressed my concerns, my partner's response was that he had been treated really well. I should have walked away right then. He would openly talk about his friend and boss going to marriage counseling and then going on dates with other women the following week. When I expressed my concern, he claimed that the wife just kept bringing up the same issues in counseling. As soon as he saw my face, he attempted to backtrack, stating he knew that wasn't a good excuse. Slowly, his work hours got later, and his weekends were spent hanging out with this man instead of helping me fix the house we had recently purchased. The house he chose was $200,000 and 1,000 square feet larger than what we had previously agreed upon. I felt like I didn't have a right to say anything because he put $100,000 of his savings down, and the house was in the name of his parents' trust. He would have his whole weekend planned by the time he got home from work on Friday night, and I got the leftover time, if that. I went out of town for 3 days for coaching sports and left a list of 3 things I requested he do: drop off a package, pick up 10 grocery items, and put a hook in the wall. He could not be bothered to sacrifice an hour out of 3 days to help me with these basic household tasks. I returned home to a dirty house with him being out of town for a day, no groceries, and no hook in the wall. It was always family, work, and his sports club, and then, if I was lucky, scheduled time for us. However, there was always something scheduled before or after that he needed to attend to. I was never a priority unless it served his wants and needs. For example, he would offer to take me away for the weekend, but only to restaurants he wanted to go to on my birthday, with activities he preferred. I guess multiple rounds of sex were my birthday present. From the way he talked about it, it was clear that it was just to stroke his ego. Over the years, his mentality shifted to, if he paid, he made the choices. That was fine, but not when I didn't ask for any of it. He used money to control and manipulate me and then acted like I was ungrateful for not having my emotional needs met. Eventually, I had enough and gave him an ultimatum, but he didn't choose me. I wasn't shocked, but I was still hurt. His actions were always the exact opposite of his words. I later found out that his boss gave him the $100,000 for the down payment on our home and lied to my face about it. In addition, he bought him a car and sent him on a work trip the day before my 40th birthday. To be fair, it was a month after our breakup, but we were still living together, and magically, for the previous 5 years, he could never take time off for my birthday. By then, he was already actively getting phone numbers from other women. He never even addressed the breakup, except via email 2 months later. He was 47. Those are just some highlights. I could go on, but what's the point? I wanted a partner. He wanted an optional accessory for when his friends were busy. I learned a lot about blindly trusting people and listening to their actions instead of just their words. I put up with way too much for far too long, and I recognize that now. I dodged a dishonest, cowardly man-child, and I am so grateful for that. I would still be miserable. 1.5 years later, I sometimes see him in public, and I become physically nauseous that I allowed him to make me feel so small. But I'll eventually work through that too. Story 83. My ex constantly accused me of inappropriate behavior with my grandmother. She thought she detected an unfamiliar smell on my face and couldn't believe it could be anything other than that. To this day, I don't know what she was sensing. She made these accusations for 5 years, involving various women, until she finally targeted my family. I can't look at her the same way anymore, especially since we have children together. Story 84. He said that if one of his daughters ever drank too much, ended up at a fraternity house, and was sexually assaulted, he would blame her. I broke up with him that day. Story 85. Their lack of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and ability to reciprocate has led to many sorrow-filled past relationships. I left every time. Story 86. He tried to coerce me into having sex long before I was comfortable. We had gone on one date, and on the way back to my house from the restaurant, he slapped my thigh so hard that it left a red mark. I declined sex on our first date even though he pushed for it. We had planned a second date, and he told me that if I didn't have sex, he would never date me again. So I ended the relationship, and he claimed he could have any woman he wanted. That didn't happen. He ended up stalking me, and the police had to get involved, which is how my last relationship ended. Story 87. She told me that she is flaky and I will just have to deal with it. Additionally, there are double standards and a lack of accountability. Story 88. Her fearful avoidant attachment disorder is understandable. I don't blame her or resent her. I genuinely hope she starts healing and finds peace. Story 89. My jobs included serving in the United States Navy, where I was always deployed, and working as a long-haul truck driver, which meant I was often away from home. With the extended periods of being away and the inherent dangers of the job, it was difficult to find someone who could cope with that lifestyle. Story 90. She stopped taking birth control without telling me because she experienced a strong desire to have a baby after seeing two of her older sisters become pregnant. We were 19 and 18 years old, and I only found out when she told me she thought she was pregnant. Fortunately, it was a false alarm, and I learned a valuable lesson. Story 91. Unchecked mental illness in her family, for which she refused any treatment, transformed her. The sweet, optimistic, and loving person became mean and cynical after a difficult period in her life and a breakdown. She emerged as a different person. I couldn't continue like this. Story 92. She lived with her ex-husband in the same house, framing it as a necessity due to having two children and a mother in the household as well. She claimed to be emotionally detached and said she hated him for 2 years. Yet she continued to have sexual relations with him during that time, except while we were dating. When I asked why she had ongoing sexual relations with him despite claiming to hate him, she made me feel guilty about my casual hookups and not having feelings for the women I was involved with. She insisted that she only had sex with people she had feelings for. She became upset and questioned why I was making her feel bad for being intimate with someone she allegedly had no feelings for. She labeled me as insane and psychotic for asking her that. Story 93. I once dated a girl who was part of a group that hazed other girls so badly it made the news. This was for some group they were all a part of. It was enough for me to realize that this was not acceptable. Story 94. The victim mentality and overall negative mindset felt like a cloud always hanging over my home during the last long-term relationship I had. It took a major toll on my personal happiness. Story 95. Stonewalling at every disagreement has been a constant issue. I have lived with being ignored in the past. Unfortunately, I still own a house with my ex-spouse, who refuses to communicate like an adult and simply does not engage in conversation. This has been reflective of how my marriage went. Story 96. She was difficult to deal with for her friends and eventually turned on me when I was the only one supporting her. It's ironic how those same people didn't like her but only cared about me when I was with her. College was socially disappointing for me outside of my former girlfriend. Story 97. My ex skipped my mom's sudden funeral because she had plans to go away for the weekend with her friends for months. Story 98. Any little thing could ruin the day, even if it was amazing. A small issue that I could fix would affect her mood, causing her to become angry. There were friends who clearly expressed their interest in her. After I informed her and showed her the messages, I was ignored. I asked her respectfully to lose their numbers after blocking them, but she said no. They constantly texted and called to the point where I now feel anxious when I hear a certain ringtone or message sound. The reason for that anxiety is that there was always a persistent problem that needed to be addressed, or I had to drop everything to help with something minor, often accompanied by emotional blackmail. Love is a powerful force, and because of my previous relationship, I struggle to be with anyone else. I wish I could just close my eyes and sleep, but I will compartmentalize this for later. Despite my feelings, I won't discourage others from seeking love. Story 99. Ghosting in favor of other people. Both partners need space from each other to be individuals, but trying to make plans with someone who would cancel at the last minute or cut plans short to hang out with others was frustrating. As a neurodivergent person who often found themselves in waiting mode, it eventually reached a point where they were close to cheating on me. The only reason they didn't was that I broke up first, and the person they were interested in turned them down shortly after. We both knew what was happening, and we were both disappointed when they tried to reconnect with me months later. Story 100. Religion. She was an evangelical Christian, and I am not religious. There was no common ground. We dated for 2 years. Story 101. I was in a relationship for over a year with a guy who seemed great, but he eventually confessed about his work. He had been dishonest about his job as an assistant and claimed he was a teacher the entire time, which felt really foolish to me. You are independent and working. Who cares about the job title? I left out of principle. If you can maintain a lie for that long, I cannot trust you with other matters. Story 102. Tickling. This girl would not stop trying to tickle me at every opportunity. I told her several times that I don't like when people try to tickle me or touch me at all without my permission. It didn't help. She would always try to tickle me. It was so unusual. I had never met anyone before or since who was so insistent on tickling another person. I ended the relationship in my apartment when she tried to tickle me again. She acted like I was the crazy one. Story 103. The fact that he still lived with his parents and wasn't willing to stand up to his mother for me. Towards the end of our relationship, she fell down the stairs and died, so I suppose I experienced retribution in a way. Story 104. I have recently discovered that having a partner with untreated extreme attention deficit hyperactivity disorder can lead to total disorganized chaos and financial ruin in your life. Story 105. A few months after I graduated from college, my dad passed away from cancer. When I leaned on him for support, he decided he wanted to spend more time with his friends, so he distanced himself from me. Story 106. Twice now, I have been in relationships with men who prefer pornography to real intimacy. While preferring pornography to sex might be acceptable, it requires honesty from the person involved. Unfortunately, they were not honest. I spent years blaming myself and trying various ways to initiate intimacy or to make them want me. It does not improve. For me, the primary benefit of being in a relationship is consistent intimacy with someone you know and trust. It deeply hurts to feel sexually rejected and frustrated all the time. Story 107. Poor communication turned into no communication. It's okay to have different styles, but if you are going to be together, both people need to adapt a bit. That never happened. He just said, "This is the way I am." He is a nice person, but we got married too young. Story 108. He was never really there for me, and it was always about what I could do for him. Everything felt transactional, and he needed time to figure out if our 6-year relationship was going anywhere. It turns out he had been keeping track of everything he spent on me, like dinners and presents, in a spreadsheet. He even asked for that amount back when I wanted to break up. If only I could go back in time and never have dated him. Story 109. 1. Untreated borderline personality disorder. 2. His wealthy family disliked me because I was not born into a generationally wealthy Indian family of the Brahmin caste. 3. He asked me to marry him, but 4 years later, he was still dragging his feet. I became fed up and left. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.